pay particular attention to the next fiscal year.
We're ready. Let's call this meeting to order. I call to order the special meeting of the Board of the Washington and Warren County Industrial Development Agency on Tuesday, March 5th, 2024 at 4:03 p.m. Ally, roll call and quorum confirmation, please.
Nick Armato,
Here.
Dave O'Brien,
Here.
Ginny Sullivan. Here. Tim Robinson,
Here.
John Taplin,
Here.
Juan Gonzalez.
Here.
We have a quorum. We have 6.
Sounds good. I'd like to introduce everybody. That she doesn't need an introduction, but I'll give an introduction nonetheless. Beth Gillis is the director of the Lake Champlain Lake George Regional Planning Board. And she's here to give us an overview, a brief of the RFP.
Hi, everyone. So as some of you may or may not know, as part of the infrastructure development at the Canal Side Energy Park in Fort Edward, the DEC is requiring the Washington County Sewer District to achieve a 4-to-1 wet weather discharge offset, so basically a stormwater offset, to then allow the hookup of the 100,000 gallons per day for the energy park to the sewer district system. We did a lot of work a little over a year ago to identify what that project would be. We actually, working with the sewer district, came up with an existing stormwater separation project that they're doing called HF1A. And so what this RFP that the IDA had put a call out for is to actually do the work to model that specific project to show that it will achieve that 4-to-1 offset that's being required to be able to hook up the energy park once the infrastructure is in place. It consists of some modeling, consists of a report, and it consists of working with the DEC to get their confirmation that they will agree that that project that's already being done by the sewer district meets the discharge or the offset requirements. And so the IDA put out a request for proposals. Only one was received from Labella at the tune of $38,340,000, which will be covered entirely by the remaining funds in the Northern Border Regional Commission grant that the IDA has. It'll leave about $600 and change left in that grant. That grant ends in September of this year. And so in discussing with Labella, they are well aware of the timeline on the completion of the project and believe that they can do it in that time.
Move to order.
I would entertain a motion to approve the request for proposal for flow monitoring, data analysis, and report for stormwater separation. Dave's first.
Is that not to exceed 40,000, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Nick second. We are expending funds even though they're being reimbursed. So as for a roll call, Ally?
Nick Armato,
Yes.
Dave O'Brien,
Yes.
Ginny Sullivan.
Yes.
Tim Robinson,
Yes.
John Taplin,
Yes.
Juan Gonzalez.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed.
Motion passed. Thank you so much, Beth. Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
We've got some training if you want to stick around. I'm kidding. I know you gotta
I'm good. I've
go.
had a long day.
Take care. All right, I'll pass over to Kara for a resolution that you would like to introduce.
Okay, so there are 2 projects that have been terminated recently. So that is the LG Plaza LLC project. That is the project that is in the town of Lake George, the Warrensburg School District. It is the Price Chopper Plaza up off of the Northway exit there. And then the other project is HF Park Properties LLC, and that is the mixed use project that's in the village of Hudson Falls. I'm not exactly sure what's currently housed there, but over the years it's been, it was a florist shop. I don't know if that florist shop is still there.
I don't think they are.
But I'm not sure, but
Apartments upstairs.
yeah, there's apartments and offices. It's mixed use. It's right there on the corner in the village. But that term is also expired. So I would just be requesting a resolution to approve for the chairman to sign those termination documents.
Isn't that Hoffman's project?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Tim first. Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Okay, yes,
Okay, discussion?
I just thought it should be, no, I guess it should.
But it's really not optional.
No.
It's just to
Right.
have something on the record
Okay.
to authorize the signing.
We were ready for a roll call. Great. Sounds good. All right, we'll move to training. Pass it back to Kara.
Okay, so
So, yeah. I would move to adjourn the meeting and go into training session. That way Ally won't have to do verbatim notes. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Still
But it's
recording?
still live streamed.
Still streaming it.
Okay.
Okay. So what's the
But we don't have to.
difference? Okay.
Yes, we do.
Well, recording, yes,
It's
for,
recorded.
Notes.
for other, for future, or
No,
board
we're
members.
recording it for people looking in the future. That's the purpose. So people can refer to it later, so we don't have to do it in. You can have people that couldn't make it. Thank you.
thank you.
I think there's an extra.
Only one double.
Kara.
There might be extra. There is definitely extras.
I already got one. Only one.
No, he's talking about the proposal.
Oh, okay.
That was pretty good. Yeah.
It's underneath
It
it.
was a boring read.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of graphs in the back of that. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah, stop drinking in the afternoon.
John, you have questions on?
No, we're past that, yeah.
All right. I'll make sure, I'll slow down next time.
No, that's okay.
Keep it in.
No, I was. They were minor.
Okay, so today we are going to go over the uniform tax exemption policy. As many of you know, this was reviewed and revised and amended over the course of a couple of years, and it was finally adopted after we opened it up for public comment by all the taxing jurisdictions in both counties. So that included the towns, the villages, the counties, the school districts. They all received a copy of the UTEP as amended, and then had an opportunity to comment on it. And we had a open session to discuss any of the changes and comments of the various taxing jurisdictions. And so this is ultimately the final version that was adopted last year around this time.
Question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can we get the list of that? or-
Yes, the opt-out's on the very last page.
Excellent, thank you. No, I'm all set.
Yeah, so the opt-out is, so just so, in case anyone is unaware, the opt-out started back in the late 90s, and municipalities were given an opportunity to opt out, which really in essence means that they must consent to an approval in their municipality before we can approve it. So in this appendix, there's a list of the towns that requested that they be formally included in this list. So for instance, if there's a project in the town of Johnsburg, we'll be required to go to the town board to get approval before the pilot can be approved by the IDA.
I can add that little bit.
Sure.
It's technically not an opt-out. So we keep on using opt-out. It's really not an opt-out, just towns requiring approval. I mean, pilot. And we're trying to we try to bring them into it as soon as possible, so they understand what's going on, understand it, because a lot of people just sit here, pilot and don't understand it. And most people think that they're losing money, they're not losing any money, they're gaining money in most circumstances, so. Just wanna make sure, to have it called opt-out, it's really not opt-out, require approval.
Negative term, it's term,
Right?
it's a negative term.
That's correct. Technically, we don't have to follow this, but we honor their requests.
And if I could add a little additional color, right now, Ally and I are dealing with a potential application from Queen Kingsbury, the everything underfoot business. I gotta be careful here. That is interested in expanding to some workforce housing. But the town is not in agreement, so we are not, promoting a pilot with this particular application. We still might do sales tax and mortgage tax exemption. But point being is, this is real, and as we go out there and promote investment in our area, we have to keep an eye on this, because there'll be times when the town simply won't agree with promoting the local investment.
How many towns are in Warren County? Just,
Well, there's 23 seats, but I don't know how many towns are, because 5 of them are from Glens Falls, right?
I don't know how many total.
What's that?
But 10,
The board,
you got the city and you got
Oh,
village,
yeah,
and then 10 towns.
Yeah.
Got work in the shape.
So
Well, except for one, right? Did you show up? Did you show up?
So the process for incentivizing a project starts with an application, and we have a significant lengthy application that sometimes doesn't fit all the all the criteria that a project has to offer, but it can be supplemented by the company with additional information. The application that we do use has been recommended by the state, so we've kind of we're utilizing that and made modifications over the years as necessary, but that is the application that they have put out to recommend. So when the board adopted this UTEP, we also added some language that would mandate a notice requirement for us to reach out to all the to the involved taxing jurisdictions at the time an application was received, so we could start that conversation right away from the outset. In the past, general municipal law requires a notice to be sent prior to the public hearing to the taxing jurisdictions. And we have found that sometimes it doesn't find its way to the proper desk, or it is overlooked and there's just so much mail coming. It's not really at front and center. So by the time we have our public hearing and then it really, the project advances, we've found that sometimes the taxing jurisdictions are just finding out about it after the fact, or even at the time that we file the pilot application with the town. So when we made these revisions and amendments to the UTEP, we decided, and at the request of the taxing jurisdictions, we added this notice requirement that said that we will reach out as soon as an application is received so that we can begin those discussions to be sure that the town is interested in moving forward with this particular project. So if there's an enhanced pilot, or enhanced request, which in most instances would be a lengthier pilot term or some other schedule other than what's in the pilot or what's in our policy, then we have additional criteria that we need to review. And then in those instances, we've added a provision that requires us to obtain the approval of a town, whether or not they're on the Appendix A list or not. We will require that the town consent to an enhanced pilot. So for instance, if it was 15 years as opposed to our standard 10-year pilot, then we would look to the town for approval. In addition, we have asked the town to take into consideration any impacts on the school. That said, from a statutory standpoint, we are required to reach out and notify the town, the county, the school district, the school district's business manager of the potential project. And so though we've kind of been coordinating on getting the official notice out in one way and then also circulating it to the parties that we want to have review it up front in advance, so there's no late notice of the project.
Do we
so to
send
speak.
that certified mail?
So the official notice, we send certified mail, return receipt, and, you know, we maintain an affidavit of mailing from that. And we keep track of that.
And
So,
that's the one that they're not always getting to.
right. It's gotten a little bit better now that we are sending them. Some people, we can send the notice on via email as well. But for the official, we're sending it for compliance and procedural purposes. We mail it, certified mail return receipt, and we have to send that 10 days in advance of the public hearing. So we try to get that out as soon as possible. I mean, there's been instances where, you know, we're overnighting it to make sure it gets there, or we're hand delivering it to make sure it gets there, and then we get a receipt depending on those circumstances. But the official is what we circulate to all those parties and get it out earlier than later.
Phone calls.
Well,
We-
actually, if,
We document that.
for applications that we know there could be an issue, we notify the town school well in advance. We have one right now that Queensbury's taking a look at that is not public because behind the scenes, they're trying to figure out if the town and school would be agreeable to what they're asking for. So we won't surprise them. We'll have
Yeah.
discussions well in advance.
And no need to further document other than the certified piece.
Right, from the compliance perspective, to have something strong from a procedural standpoint, that's the required piece of it.
But
So,
general-
right, so general information to make the process more smooth is being handled internally. So, with the discussions and things of that nature.
And actually, part of the court case we went through with Smaller Square, part of it was because we did have notice to them, they received it, just no one ever read it. And that was a key point there, because we followed what we were supposed to do, even though they're not on the list of towns.
So, so we get the application, we notify the taxing jurisdictions, then we're required to have a public hearing on the project. And after the public hearing is held, we can approve the project and the incentives that are discussed. But before we get to that point, there's a cost benefit analysis that's prepared. There's additional information that is presented to the board for review and consideration before the public hearing. The public hearing, we also provide to the taxing jurisdictions all the information that with the application. So they get the information regarding what the company is requesting, what we're going to be considering as far as approval of incentives, and they get a draft of our resolution scheduling that. So they're obviously welcome to attend the hearing or submit their comments in writing. But we provide them with a copy of the proposed resolution as well. So they have that in place. Before we can officially close on a project, the project has to be the State Environmental Quality Review Act, the Seeker Act, needs to be complied with. So that what the IDA does is we defer to the town board or town planning board's determination on that. And so we adopt that as our own once that's completed. So sometimes the board will, or sometimes the company will come to us before they have that and try, and see if we're interested in incentivizing the project. And sometimes they come to us after. We can approve it conditionally upon the environmental, but we need to be sure we have that environmental piece completed before we can close on a transaction. So, we offer 3 types of incentives, and I think the bond discussion is for a different day with bond counsel. So that's.
How long do we have?
So we can incentivize a project with an exemption from sales tax. The policy allows for 100% exemption on sales tax for the project. So that includes the construction, materials, rentals of equipment, the fixtures and fittings for a particular project. So for instance, we have undertaken a couple of hotel projects. It's a big savings for hotel projects because they're incorporating into the hotel all the typical standard things you see in a hotel room, all the TVs, all the beds, all the this and that, all of those things would be sales tax exempt for a particular project. So same thing if there is a manufacturing facility, anything that is used to construct that facility and equip it would all be sales tax exempt. So after the project is completed, the sales tax exemption expires. So one thing I should know is that if you do have a manufacturing project, manufacturing equipment itself is already tax exempt. So it doesn't go into the calculation for the incentive that we're providing. That's already a state law.
So the entire sales tax, not just what we collect locally.
Correct.
Correct.
Entire state.
State and county.
So on that note, though, can we limit what's sales tax exempt? Can it just be the construction and not the TVs and the beds and stuff like that? Can we be like a partial? I mean,
Right.
if it makes,
You could
if
do.
it makes the
You could
community
do
happy.
that, you could limit it to just a portion of that sales tax, the state portion of it. But your current policy does not allow for that.
So I will go on record here.
Our policy doesn't allow that. Okay, that's what I would.
So I would go right on record and say that's one of the strongest selling points of the program. Is yes, the property sales tax exemptions are a benefit, but the amount of sales tax they save allows them to invest back into business. If we start limiting that, it limits the attraction of it. And, you know, as I've said before, we're not the only one competing for business. We're competing with the whole world for business. And the stronger we make a proposal to bring people here, the better off we are. And the question is this too much? Well, if you go someplace else, you lost 100 jobs, 200 jobs, 50 jobs, which is very important. The community, especially in our own economic environment, in my opinion, we need to find ways to attract people and offer them incentives, because New York is a negative place for business to come. Has some negatives for companies doing business. We need help overcome them. And that's my strong point on that. And, you know, we can second guess ourselves, but, you know, these do work. The incentives do work. And for that, we get a fee to carry these companies. And, you know, they're proven to work. Why play with it? We're competing with counties in New York State that offer larger incentives.
Well, in some instances, though, they're coming to the Lake George region near Lake George. So in that aspect, if Lake George wasn't happy with a certain thing or a certain town, if we're enhancing things, it might be something you'd want to look at to get buy-in.
Well, when we did,
That's, or county even to get buy-in.
we did the Marriott project in Lake George. That project received mortgage exemption and mortgage tax exemption, sales tax exemption, but they did not receive a pilot because the municipality wasn't agreeable to that. So, they didn't. So we didn't.
That was more public pressure on the company than it was on the idea.
Mhm.
It was the local environment in Lake George that was concerned about coming in, who wanted the hotel, but they didn't want the tax exemptions, so we went with the sales tax and mortgage tax. It was sufficient for them to make their balance sheet work. And, you know, there's arguments we have, and, you know, we are gonna need to be more aggressive in our incentives to make sure people come here. I
So-
agree, people may come here because they want to live in Lake George, but they're business people. Ask Tim how many people look at the balance sheets and say, hey, it doesn't work number wise here, I'm going someplace else. I don't care if I want to live in Lake George. I don't care if I own a $5 million spread on Lake George. If it doesn't work financially, I'm not coming here.
But basically, under our policy, we can't do that at this point anyway. We can't limit.
Well, it
Somebody
says that
100%.
it says unless otherwise determined by resolution of the agency. So you could adopt a resolution indicating that, oh my gosh, I'm shrinking.
Just- What page are you on?
Yeah, my shrunk too.
I'm on page 5, the very bottom.
You need that, Nick? Page 5?
No.
Page
that-
5E.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, you would have to have some basis for reducing the project. So for instance, if the municipality says we're not interested in, in authorizing the full 100%, and this was a condition of them consenting, that would be an example. But
That's where I was
If-
going, and in Dave's actual idea of we need jobs, we need this, we need that. If it was competing with another company that already existed and you were gonna take their workers away, you may say, hey, if you're doing that, we're not gonna give you that. And I think conditions alter
I mean,
cases.
I think it's gonna have to be reviewed on a
On a case-by-case.
case by case basis,
Yeah,
because
okay.
if it's a company that's coming and you just decide, hey, we only want to reduce the state portion with no because after it, then any other company coming next, you're gonna have to set some precedent
Right.
or not,
Okay.
and then risk that the company themselves challenge based
Well,
on.
it's interesting because before we wanted more jobs, now we need more people to work. It's kind of
Yeah.
flipped. And so you think you kind of have
That'll
to weigh
change.
where you have to weigh where the employees are gonna come from. If they're gonna make a company that's very profitable, that's been in your community forever and make them non-profitable, you might want to reconsider whether you're really working for them.
So I want to get back to go to our enabling statute. Our enabling statute says nothing about jobs. It says economic development.
Yep.
There's two pieces to this. The first piece is economic development. Economic development is to bring business in, assessments in. Whether or not it creates jobs is a good thing. But let's talk about a company that's been here for 100 years. And they're gonna they may do a huge investment in their firm. And the assessed value of the company may go up by 300, 400, 500 million. By the flip side, they may be reducing jobs.
Yep.
So where's your decision level? Do you want the assessments or do you want to go someplace else?
Well, I think that's why she said a case by case basis. I think you're gonna have to look at them.
But actually remember, there's nothing in the enabling statute says jobs. It's up to us. Yes, we want jobs, don't get me wrong. Economic development is economic development. And we're here to enhance like a friend of mine said, Janet Kelly, who worked a lot on bringing Global Foundries in. He said, he says a pilot lasts for about 10 years. Those jobs last forever.
No, that's not true anymore, but.
Well, it's not
It used
true
to be.
anymore, but it was.
Point well taken.
Craig, you have a question? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I do, and this relates to strategy of the IDA in regards to some sector like hotels. That one thing that was reported is that back 10 or more years ago, Saratoga built heavily on hotel rooms. Their average price, daily price rate, ADRs, reduced because there was an oversupply of rooms. So should the IDA be concerned about giving, let's say, 3 hotels come in with applications and want tax breaks? And we grant all of that, but then what it ends up doing is providing an oversupply of rooms, so prices drop across the board for everybody. And we've just adversely affected our local economy. Should that be any concern of when we weigh in on these UTEP decisions?
That's a good point, Craig. And it's something that we need to look at and consider. I think that we need to evaluate. I'll take that back for a second. These companies coming in to put up hotels aren't going to bring them up if they don't think they can fill them. they're gonna compete with the hotels that are already here. And I really haven't seen too much of a company coming in if there's too many hotel rooms. They're not gonna do it. But what you do have is a cycle of any business. You got businesses like hotel rooms come up and they're around for what, they don't put the investment back in the hotel or motel, and they start to slide in their quality. And you're gonna have people come in. So, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, I agree with your point, Craig, but we also have to look at, what's good for the economy, what's there. And remember that people aren't gonna invest tens of millions of dollars to build a hotel if there's not a business for it and there's not a return on investment.
Yeah, we had 3 or 4 hotel projects right in a row, and then we haven't had any hotel projects since then. I assume they are required to do all sorts of studies to
Yeah, we have one on the
get the
docket.
financing for those projects.
We have one on the docket now, and Dave and I have met with them, and they have very clearly said they've done their market analysis, and they're coming at the market from an angle that they believe is not being fulfilled. So I think for this in the near future, it will be what it is. But to Craig's point, over time, if the market becomes saturated, then in the finding statement, we would recognize that. But to Dave's point, I think the investor is going to pick that up before we do.
So it's each individual thing as it comes up.
Yes.
It is, it's case by case. It has to everyone.
It has to be case by case, everything.
The one we're talking about already has hotels in this area, and he's gonna invest in.
I'm sorry.
The one we're talking about already has done a pilot with us, and he's looking to do another one. So,
Well, most everything we do is gonna be on case by case basis anyway, so
That's really what it is.
that's what it is.
So Craig, since you asked the question, just curious, the hotel one is a pretty easy one to look at. Was there another situation on the industry that you would consider that the same scenario we would have to look at? And I know you mentioned individually, but I meant, as I look through construction industry, how many construction companies or how many banks or how many other types of projects that we have done in the past, or unique ones like native development. I mean, I know that the hotel one and rooms and beds are an important topic and one that is very clearly, we could find some metrics to figure out whether or not oversaturation happens, but is there any others?
Another one that's coming up is cannabis. So we have one project here in the town of Chester that was Etain, and I just happened to see some comments on it because town of Chester has just gone through a reassessment and they're on a pilot, and people are going, how is it they get away without getting increased after having been sold? But that's a whole nother discussion. If more growers come into the area and are looking for, tax breaks here, how many do we entertain?
the tax incentives.
You're what?
Incentives. Thank you.
Right. No one's gonna.
I was looking for that word.
No one's gonna pay less money. They may pay more even on the base property.
Dave won't give you a break to give you an incentive, don't worry. Hey, Craig,
That's a good
just
point.
for interest
No,
on
we
that,
did,
though,
we've done Etain.
with Etain thing, that's an actual standard pilot, 10 years? Or is that longer?
Those 10 years.
It's 10 years.
10
And so that's gonna be up
Correct. It's-
relatively quickly. I mean, it's funny how time flies, that won't be an issue when that thing's up. The taxpayers will be singing a different tune when Etain comes on at full value.
So let me talk about a situation that actually happened, and it was concern and competitorship. There was a company that built boats in Ticonderoga area, the north part of the lake. Wooden boats. And they were looking at the fact that where they were, there was not enough room for expansion. There was not enough draw of people where they were at, and they wanted to relocate to Quincy area. And they came to the IDA looking for assistance to make the move down here. And we had people objecting to giving them incentives because they were moving from Ticonderoga down here. And they sort of got scared away from moving to Glens Falls or Queensbury. They eventually did. However, the long and short of it, they were going to invest in another company with fiberglass bolts, and the headquarters is going to be, guess where? Queensbury. Long story short, they got so much pushback from looking for incentives to do that. They actually had moved that company to South Carolina. We lost that company. The Wooden Bolt Company did come down here. They reduced a lot of their manufacturing and shipped it off other places in the country. We lost. So not only did the north part of I guess they're southern Essex County, lost their business. Queensbury lost part of it too.
State.
They had an ocean, we had a lake.
Is that,
They had an ocean, we had a lake.
well, that particular company has an owner that is kind of a horse's patoot too.
So, anything on cannabis? I saw the, You like-
The one thing that's called, we actually have 3 applications right now, of cannabis, and the issue is they're all on hold because of the difficulty within New York State and cannabis regulations. And then frankly, the banking industry too. It's a hard business to do your banking with. So I think there's some maturity that needs to occur before we have a serious application.
Yeah,
Not with us. Federally chartered,
not with, yeah,
any federally chartered bank is, they're smart, would not do anything with them because the government, federal government would turn it off like that and say, no.
I forget who
Turn that one.
E-Pain financed with.
Yeah.
Some paid place in the, I mean, it's all public record. It's,
So
yeah, Kinder Hope. something.
Cayman Islands?
No,
Got
that part though.
don't quote me on that, but I think,
So some banks are state chartered.
yeah,
Is it Coxsackie? Coxsackie? Is that something?
that may be exactly, but
it's somewhere in that general area.
remember who owned it?
Yeah, they had a strong,
The Beckhams.
they had a strong balance sheet behind it.
Oh, I'm not questioning. that we
You get a
should-
stronger-
So is
John-
the state chartered compared to a federal chartered bank? Is the difference?
Yeah.
Well, because it's not federally,
Recognized.
Yeah.
It's not legal.
Do it.
Credit
Locally
unions
chartered.
can do it, yeah, and I think they are, starting to, but it's been an issue up until now. And I think they're finding ways around the banking issues. You got a lot of cash.
right, there's a lot of like these investor companies that come in and they're the middle.
I think they're. I think
It's
they
very
made a good
sticky
investment.
with a national bank.
Very,
Mhm.
very.
The Beckhams-
It's sticky before they dry it too.
They started
Not
out
even
with-
going there, Ryan.
They started with $10 million investment and they sold it for like $222 million.
So it's a nice return on your money. I think that is.
Fingers back in,
I would
Kara.
take that
Okay.
in a second.
You should.
Last point on sales tax is that it's the one incentive that state law mandates that we recapture if it's inappropriately taken. So, Ally and Chuck are reaching out to the companies. They are about this time of year, getting all the information and reports. We keep track of when they're coming up for expiration to say, hey, do you need an increase? Do you need an extension? Let us know why. We'll consider it. Because if they do go over, we're required to recapture that by state law. Or if they take it for a use that is improper, we're required to recapture that. So that's not an optional recapture, the sales tax. So the other,
So just a little dig into that a little bit. So we're reviewing their purchases type of deal or how?
we can ask for anything. What they
Okay.
do provide to us is a form that says this is what I've taken so far to date.
Okay.
Typically, as long as they've been below the amount, and we've had circumstances where they've been over, it's their responsibility to, so say for instance, sometimes people say, okay, I want, what they get is a form, an ST60, and that is what they give to a vendor to get the sales tax exemption. So sometimes people say, can I get one for my contractor? So we'll issue them one for the contractor, but the total exemption is based on all the ST60s you have issued. So, we put on there the maximum for this project number because every project has a number for tax and finance purposes. And so it's the company's responsibility to gather those from the people that they've requested to be what is called a third-party agent. And then if they're over, to kind of coordinate with them. So we've had issues in the past. A lot of it has been double reporting of information because they take theirs and they add it to theirs and then, but it's up to the company to do that. Now, if somebody says this is where we're at, we're way over, we have the authority to ask for all of the vouchers, all of the information, all of the paperwork that supports their project expenditures. And once we file the ST60 with the state, and then once we get, then they're required to file the ST340s with the state and give us a copy. But we kind of keep after them to make sure they did that. So to be sure that they've also complied with state law on that, to be sure that we have that.
And a common mistake that I see is, say we have sales tax exemptions that go more than 1 year. I'll get an ST340, which is their reporting of what they use for sales tax exemption, and say it's 10,000 this year. And then the following year, say they only use 10,000, they'll put 20 because they include the previous years. That's a common mistake. So it's just another thing to look out for.
You reach out to them and say, hey.
Yeah. Make sure that it's a mistake on their reporting as opposed to they numbers, yeah.
And
Over.
if they do go over or potentially go over, that means they've been generally over on their project costs, and they need to come back to us for authorization because that would affect their pilot. And also if they get increased project costs, it increases our fee to them.
And we can approve the overruns after the fact, or does that?
No.
Okay.
So that's why we try to stay on top of them to let them know, hey, this is expiring. Like, for instance, native development, their authorization is gonna expire the end of this month. We've reached out to them. Do you need an extension? Do you need an increase? They don't need an increase at this point, but they do need an extension. So,
You have to get those first.
yeah, so that'll be on the March agenda.
Have we ever
for
had that
particular-
happen?
What?
Where, what he just said, that they didn't.
Yeah, we
get the
had one where they had to
extension and
pay.
You have to collect
Yeah.
tax, but you can give them the extension after. But they're still gotta pay. in
They've got to
between.
pay the part, yeah,
In
where they
between,
weren't,
yeah.
where they were eligible for. So, yeah, we've had that where we had to collect and submit it to tax and finance. And then every year you approve the ST62 form, and that form says, did we recapture this year? Yes or no? Then depending on how you answer the next questions. And we're required to file that as well for the sales tax piece of it. So the other incentive we can provide is mortgage recording tax exemption. And that is 1.25% in either county on the mortgage that they file in the county clerk's office. And so typically the mortgage amount, the exemption amount, we find kind of covers their admin fee and their legal fees, because they pay the IDA's legal fees for this, and then they pay the IDA administrative fee, which is 0.9% of the total project cost. Well, it's a sliding scale, but that's where we start. And so that's usually kind of a wash for that. I've seen in most instances, but so that exempts them from the filing. Refinances are generally exempt when they come back to refinance. Depending on the amount, it may not be the same amount that on a refinance, only the new money would be, or if they refinance with a different lender. It's kind of all dependent on the situation if they come back to us. The LG Plaza is refinancing now. And so I noticed that they were expired. So I was like, hey, we'll just do the termination. You don't need to have a subordination agreement from us. So we'll just do that. But that's That's that. So we file an affidavit with the mortgage. We sign on to the mortgage as well. We sign on to the mortgage as a having an interest in the property because we take a leasehold interest in the property. The company leases us their property. We lease it back to them. We put both of those leases on record and then the mortgage goes on. So once we have, the law requires us to have jurisdiction over a particular piece of property and that lease establishes that sufficient for state law. So we do have the leasehold interest and then we sign on to the mortgage. We obviously don't sign on to the note or anything like that. Depending on the bank, we sign sometimes the assignment of rents and leases, but usually it's only the mortgage that they want us to sign. Any questions on mortgage recording tax? Okay, not really a sexy subject. Okay, yeah.
I think I asked it before, that mechanic lien was put or something that doesn't impact us as a leaseholder of the land or how? Or does it?
No,
Okay.
it doesn't, we have included in all the documents that we sign, a non-recourse language that says that the company will indemnify us, hold us harmless. We cannot be responsible for any sort of defaults that you have with respect to our involvement with this particular project. So, that language actually extends to both counties as well, in their county capacity. But we include that. So so the best way, this comes up a lot actually with the cannabis companies and their investors, because they say, wait a minute, I don't want you to have a leasehold interest in this project because what about if my company goes in default? Then I'm going to lose this property to the IDA and it's going to be kind of outside my, outside my control. And I'm just the money person here. But from the IDA's perspective, if the company goes to default, we want to terminate them from our program, if you will. So what we would do is if they go into default, they would have to come to us. We would have the right to terminate all the agreements and then put them back on the tax rolls and then recapture any benefits that they'd received to date, if that's something you chose to do, depending on the circumstances of the project. So we are not in the business of saying, okay, we would like to take over this particular factory or hotel if you go into default. I mean,
Oh.
It's up to the bank.
right, yeah.
So if we do recapture, what's our recourse then, other than Yola's monument, they're going into default
Right.
already?
You can
Is
try to
the people-
recapture. Can you keep your lien on the property until you recapture, right?
Well,
Or is
you could sue them and to recapture and get a judgment and put it on record.
A bank is gonna
A
come.
bank's
before
gonna
you.
come before. So if you've got, a $5 million loan ahead of your, $300,000 lien for recapture. And our recapture is sliding scale, so it starts like in the first year, in the second year, it's different amounts of recapture, and it's all discretionary. So it's within the company has an opportunity to be heard and come and speak to the board, explain why they're in default, explain why they're not in a position to continue the business, whatnot. And then it would be up to the board to make a decision as to whether or not they wanted to recapture some portion of it. It's that we're required by law to have a recapture policy, but it's also discretionary.
And I think if we one time we went back and researched some of the companies that we've done projects for. We haven't. Ryan, I got a knock on the window. We've been very fortunate that the incentives have allowed them to get a good, strong foothold. And the first 5 years of a company's business is most critical, starting with the first year. And then those ones that make it for 5 years are the ones that have the stability, but the more they make it, but the more we can incentivize to help them through first 5 years, have more money to invest back into the company, more money to look at different projects, product lines and expand. So we've been very fortunate not having lost projects that I've seen over the past years. I mean, some have gone, some left the area, but this is after their pilots were over. Some was sold out, but
So
very fortunate.
so it is safe to say the due diligence during the application process really helps us to not run into this quite a bit as well.
And then the third incentive is the pilot. So that is an exemption from your real property taxes. So the company is always required to pay special district taxes, special district assessments. So fire tax, water, sewer, all of those. If they're in a special, if the municipality has some other kind of special district, yeah, any of those, any special district tax, the company always pays based on 100%. Those are not exempted at all. And as you know, the IDA pays a fire tax, so, they pay the full amount on
And
those.
that's true with every pilot, whether the IDA puts it on or anybody, right?
Correct. Yeah, the special district, special assessments are always collected. So our traditional pilot is where the entity, the company will pay the base value of the always on the current taxes. So if the property is valued at $100,000 at the time of the pilot filing, then they will always pay taxes through the pilot term on $100,000. The exemption is only on the improvement piece. So if they have vacant land, it's $100,000, they build a $1 million assessed improvement, the exemption is only on the $1 million. And so, we have a variety of schedules for different types of projects. So, there's classified under manufacturing and industrial projects. Those have historically been, 100% exemption on the improvement for the first 5 years, and then 50% exemption for the second 5 years. And then, we have other projects that don't fall into the manufacturing category. So this could be tourist destination projects we've done, office mixed, well, not mixed use.
Brookfield Renewable,
Which one?
Brookfield Renewable.
Oh, yeah. And so those are 50% exemption for 5 years and then 25% for the next 5 years. And then we've identified, another category of hotels, mixed use, per commercial apartments, etc. projects. And, this starts with 50% exemption in the first year and then is reduced 5% for the next 10 years. So it would go 50, 45, and so on and so forth. And then the renewable power facilities, this was added and after a lot of discussion with respect to solar and things of that nature, the general municipal law was modified by the state legislature to include renewable energy projects in the authorization of IDAs. But because of the unique nature of the actual infrastructure, if you will, with these types of entities, we had left it up as to a case-by-case basis, because lots of times these projects are valued based on like a megawatt output or things of that nature. So as opposed to the value of the infrastructure that's being placed on the property. So that is on a case-by-case basis. And in the past, and I think going forward, we would want to retain a consultant in that particular industry to help us come up with what that particular pilot structure looks like, if it was a hydro project or a solar project, just because they would be able to speak better to how these are typically.
It's more of not really understanding what the pilot is, but making sure we understand all the other incentives.
Right.
To justify doing the pilot. And there's also in New York State recently, there's a change in the methodology for the valuation of solar projects, which actually lowers the assessment, so hence lowers the taxes. So there are many reasons why we believe solar projects don't need IDA incentives. And again, it's case by case.
So once we enter into the pilot agreement, that document gets filed with all the taxing jurisdictions and it takes effect the March 1st after it's filed. So typically it's this first exemption is the school tax year after it's filed. But as you know, we've had to come back to the board in some instances recently on native development. They were behind schedule. They wanted to push back their year 1 year so they could take advantage of that first year exemption. Because it was filed basically too early for them to take advantage, for them to have any meaningful construction completed. The assessment wasn't going up typically because of the Construction Act. So I don't know if you have specific questions about the pilot. The next topic is all the things you need to consider.
Is that gonna be tonight?
I don't know.
Huh?
Well, we're at 5 PM. Who's got,
Well, I mean, if we go at this rate, we can't do it, because otherwise we're gonna have bedrooms out here, because we won't finish until tomorrow morning.
is this a good spot to stop?
Sure.
All right. Any questions for Kara on anything we covered?
So basically what you were going to continue on with is this policy.
Yeah.
Is the things that we have to.
Yeah.
Things that you have to consider
I think-
when you're reviewing.
Yeah, well, it takes time.
Yeah, and it wouldn't hurt to have questions and answers.
And let me just point out, those are what's in the finding statement that's prepared. That's what the finding statement is based off of, what Kara's talk about, things we have to hit.
Okay.
So just an overview. You mentioned pilots and it came up sort of in a random way. Is that there is a capability for a town to do a pilot, for a school to do a pilot, the county to do a pilot. The problem is for a company, you have to approach 3 different agencies. And it makes it more cohesive for us, for them and us, if we do the pilot, it governs every agency. And, you know, I think it's important to remember that we have things we can offer that counties, schools, or municipalities can offer, is that sales tax and mortgage tax. And really, that's, to me, is one of the biggest incentives, especially when you got a company that's coming here, do it. I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Look at WL Plastics, and why I think about that every time I walk down that stairways. And look at that chair, that's where I was sitting when WL Plastics called me and said, we just pulled the project. So I always think about it come down through it, because that was a culmination of about 3 years of work to get that company here, and anyhow, it doesn't matter. They all had options. And they chose here not because we had the best pilot, because they had, I knew some of the other pilots offered in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and down in, it was New York City, wasn't New York City, it was down there. We weren't the best. But there were other reasons I came here, but I can tell you that if we had not offered incentives, they wouldn't have come here. We would have gone someplace else. They might have gone to Saratoga County, might have gone to Essex County. You know, it was just a facility that worked for them best. But we have to remember is companies have options today, even more competitive options than we can provide. And we're going to run into that. So we need to be prepared to do that. And, you know, I go back to the factory, we say that we're giving away tax breaks, as Mr. Leggett insists on calling them. They're not tax breaks, they're incentives. You know, but
He's laughing.
Get him, Craig.
But we have to remember, one thing I'll go back to is that there are conditions where a piece of property may in fact increase in value for the base property. Remember, we got an agricultural field, it's under ag, it's not ag anymore, it can't be classified as ag, so the assessment value is not gonna change, but the classification of the property is gonna change. It could go from residential to industrial, so it's gonna go up. There are places where it's gonna go up simply by the nature of what it is. The total value assessment is not gonna change, but how it's classified is gonna be changed, so we have to keep that in mind. And, you know, yeah, but remember is that we are established by a state agency. We are established as a, public benefit corporation by the direction of the state legislature. We only draw from counties and 5 members from each county. Companies you know, counties and municipalities don't have any right to tell us what to do or what not to do. I'm not saying we shouldn't work with them, but we do have to understand where we fit in. We're economic development, we're not regulators. But, you know, I think more people need to understand there's a positive benefit coming out of it. And the jobs and monies returned to the counties in short and long terms is substantial.
Agreed.
Craig, you had a question?
Yeah, will we be getting in any of our educational sessions here about an applicant when they put down on their form, would you do this project if it was not for the incentives that are offered on things? And how do we as a board verify something like that, or we take them just at their word?
Well, let me jump in. That's kind of my job and, right, Craig, sort of my job, and that's your job to make sure I do my job in a sense. But then my finding statement, I have to vet that out. Matter of fact, just this morning, I called back somebody in Washington County and said we would not advance their application because their project is further in the development cycle. So we are constantly making sure that these projects do qualify. And in the incentives, it's the incentive to pull the trigger to do the project or to take the savings and reinvest in the project to make it a larger project. But one way or another, we make it very clear to them that that has to be an obligation that they have to own up to. And if they don't own up to it, then the application really won't
But I
proceed.
believe we've approved them in the past when they've even said yes. That
Yeah.
they would do it without incentives.
Well, would they do the same,
Yes.
but would they do, Brian, would they do the same scope? Meaning,
Don't know that.
right, that's my
But
point.
I know it was checked yes and we still approved it.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
So I know it can happen. Just from past.
Yeah, no, it really is an area that we do vet out and
I'm sure, I always remember that that's not just, we grilled them about why.
That was
yes.
before I was on the board.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think
I
so.
don't think I've ever seen them.
There had to have been justification or.
Yeah.
well, remember,
I
you
don't
also,
remember the justification, but I remember it happening.
we have a finding statement that will look at the costs they came as far as taxes waived and then the benefits to the community, the jobs, the sales
Right.
tax, the construction jobs. And so, you know, typically we clearly show that the project is a benefit to the community. In addition to the applicant saying, yeah, I need this.
And I think we
before.
did do that, but they did say that, yes, they were building it come out of high water, but we'd still get these up.
I think I remember what you're talking about, but I will tell you the answer they gave us. They were exactly.
I don't remember the answer. I
It was
just,
this time when they're going into COVID and materials were skyrocketing in pricing. And they were looking at building a project that if they didn't get the incentives, they would have to A, downgrade the size of the project, B, take a very nice looking, what ended up being a very nice looking project, servicing a few hundred people, and would reduce the quality. Instead of putting nice brick facades on, they were gonna put vinyl siding on. And they're gonna cut down the size. Yes, they were gonna do the project because it was 12 years into getting that project approved. That Queensbury, the municipality they were in, kept on making specifications that kept on moving down the road. So yes, they did do it. And yes, I know it, but if that project had been done smaller, it would not have been beneficial. The community, it's a place where it fills a huge need for people coming into the area. People who are looking to downsize into their living accommodations without giving up their sort of lifestyle, so to speak. And it filled a very needed gap in the community.
I think you're in a different project with this.
Well, that's not a good lead into our next training topic. I'm not sure what that would be. All right.
So,
But I think all these things, and Kara said it before, there's, even with the recapture, you still have the ability to not recapture. You just have to have the policy. And I think that's the same with these questions. If there's enough positive to a job, even if they would do it without the incentive, doesn't mean you don't still do it. And I think it might keep you from voting for it. But I remember we passed it. I don't even remember which side I was on. I just know it passed.
Well, I'm sure there's a video somewhere. All right.
It might have been before video.
I just think that, you know, to a certain extent, you have to accept them at their face value. I mean, if you call them at least, it doesn't come.
Well, this is where we're gonna focus on the next training topic. It seems to be another robust session. Obviously, this won't happen during a regular board meeting. This is gonna be a long one as well, so. We'll separate it out. We'll get the date out, give everybody a little break, and then we'll get the date out to everybody. Good. All right.
I think this has been good because
That
we
it?
haven't gone over a lot of this in a long time.
No, that's good.
It's always good. to
Dinner calling?
Remind everybody.
Dinner calling?
Yes.
Nick is fine.
All right.
No, I lost.
Thank you,
a lot of money
everybody.
the other
Do I need to make a motion to adjourn?
I lost. a lot of money.
Second. Craig, take care.